Greetings, Culturians, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I have to be realistic about what our expectations should be about the Oscars, or any award show for that matter, because all of the ratings have collapsed, especially over the last 30 years. As we get closer to 2030, we'll start to realize an even more dire situation for this, which is, I think, why they're moving the Oscars to YouTube in 2 years. ABC had them this year, next year, and the following year. After that, it's over. They go purely digital because it's too embarrassing to produce a show that, well, nobody's watching. In fact, they only drew 17.9 million viewers, and that's an absolute collapse. And we're going to talk about it because the numbers here are staggering. Here we go. Now, before we get started, just a real quick reminder, I am trying to get to 50K, so double check you're still subscribed to the channel, and if not, hit the subscribe button, and then hit the bell icon, turn on all notifications, and hit the thumbs up button, and we're off to the races, and I appreciate it. Let's look at the story. Coming to us from several places, but we'll start here with World of Real. Jordan Rumi says, the Oscars ratings sink 9% to 17.8 million viewers as cultural relevance continues to decline. Decline, I think that's a kind way to say spiral to the depths of Hades, but I could be wrong. As we take a look at what's happening right now, we are not surprised to understand why. The films being honored at the Oscars are strictly controlled and have to fit a certain kind of parameter that we're starting to get rid of in society. We're going to, judge things on the content rather than on the paint by numbers check marks that the virtue signalers want. And that's the biggest problem with the Oscars and why nobody's watching these days. At least that's my opinion. Let's jump into the story from Jordan and see what he has to say. The 98th Academy Awards held on Sunday attracted 17.86 million viewers, and this is across both ABC and Hulu, continuing the trend of declining audiences for major award shows. In fact, they're not alone. This represents a roughly 9% drop from last year, so the year-to-year drop is substantial. And if you look back at history, and that's the important thing here, you're looking at such a decline that, well, in 1998, there were 57 million people watching the Oscars. So if you look at that 28-year period of time, you've dropped by, well more than half. In fact, you're now essentially a third or so, about there, of what the viewership used to be. It used to be that it would attract people. And by the way, everybody still had cable in 1998. So stop making excuses and realize that because of the other options, which would be streaming or the fact that you just make terrible movies now, are probably more the reason why, which is why the Grammys are dropping too, which dropped 24%. And even the Super Bowl hit a 7-year low. Well, look, these types of things happen, and especially during halftime, look what happened with the Super Bowl, and we did a video about that right up there, which you can find on this channel at any time you want. Anyway, let's continue on because I think it's kind of important. Last year, the Oscar Awards jumped to a high of 19.69 million viewers, marks the smallest Oscars since 2022, when it was 16.68 million tuned in, according to Nielsen's big data numbers and panel ratings. Now, that also needs to be talked about because I keep saying Nielsen's not telling the truth. I actually am prepping a video on that right now that should air maybe at the end of the week. We have to talk about the fact that these numbers are inaccurate, to say the least, and very disappointing when you look at that compared to what they used to be. Even with 57 channels and nothing on, which was the major complaint in the growth of cable and cable channels, we are in an era where there's contraction across multiple platforms. And we also are seeing that the streaming isn't contributing as much as it used to. The only place that's having growth right now is YouTube, and that's being hammered by AI slop. And YouTube needs to take a look at good channels like mine and give them the thumbs up and turn the volume back up so that you can avoid all the AI trash that's out there. That's my opinion. If you have one on it, let me know in the comments section below. Worse yet, Americans just don't care about the Oscars anymore, and they can also just watch the highlights on YouTube the next day, which are oftentimes edited better. In fact, you can cut out a lot of nonsense in between the clapping and everything else and just get to the heart of the matter. If the host is good, like Conan O'Brien usually is, then you have clippable moments that, well, any channel could capitalize, or specifically ABC in this case. They don't seem to understand how to post things that go viral or how to be successful in that field. They need to hire more creators, and that's something that most of these major networks are doing to produce creator content for them. Regardless, even more concerning, the show is losing its core loyal audience aged 50 or over. That would be me, guys. And I grew up going to the movies and watching these award shows thinking they meant something. Who can forget that Chariots of Fire and many other controversial choices over the years left other films snubbed, and yet they still drew attention even after the Oscars had already been delivered. It's oftentimes frightening to me just how short the windows are for most films, because they're either good and profitable or they're awful and head to streaming. And what's weird is we had an awful movie win multiple Oscars this year, and at least one of the Oscar winners with a lot of numbers did pretty well. It's just hit or miss these days. And again, if you don't check the boxes, you don't get the awards. That's just not the way it should go. Isn't it telling just 10 years ago in 2016, the Oscar ratings reached nearly 35 million viewers. When compared to last night's telecast, that's a loss of 17 million. Yeah, and here it is, once again, taking a look at where they were, losing half the audience from just a decade ago, which not only is disappointing, it's, eye-opening, or at least it should be for a lot of these studios and for the Academy of Motion Picture Sciences as well. I have to tell you right now, I have no faith in the Oscars getting any better. I'm curious if you do. Let me know in the comments section below. But we're not done. We're going to talk about the drop of 9% from a perspective coming from That Park Place, and specifically Trevor Denning, who's writing great things right now over there on the site. The Oscars still represent the biggest night in Hollywood. However, viewership ratings suggest that for the rest of the country, it is just another Sunday evening. And according to Nielsen's Big Data Plus panel, the 98th Annual Academy Awards drew 17.86 million on ABC and Hulu. That's down 9% from last year's 19.7 million. Well, I made a mistake. So I guess we only have, 2 more years of terrible awards coming from our friends over at ABC, and then it'll eventually go over to YouTube and die. And people are really going to watch over on YouTube. They might clip moments. They might create clips that people will be engaged with on other social platforms. I think YouTube needs to, create a little less censorship and a little more openness in order to bring some audience back to these types of things. But you have to create the ability for people to signal their displeasure. And again, the motivation to remove the thumbs down button was all because of stuff like this, the pointing out the cultural sludge that was being promoted and the fact that the audience was just unhappy with it. You have to understand, people won't watch things that they've been experienced as very bad. If you brought the dislike button back, I think you would engage the audience more. And this is an argument that I don't think anybody can dispute. We need to know what's good or bad. Good information, bad information. Good entertainment, bad entertainment. And I think we should also be able to do that, especially on critics' videos. If you like the way I criticize things, you should be able to have a public thumbs down. If you like the things that I criticize, you could publicly thumbs it up, like you should be doing on all the videos of the creators that you like, at least the ones that are good. We become a society where we are abandoning thoughtful, rational thinking for feelings and emotion. And like I said before, this is a form of empathy that is incredibly toxic, and that's very prevalent in our culture these days. Variety notes that this continues a downward trend across all award shows, which is accurate. As I said before, viewership for both the Golden Globes and the Grammy Awards dropped 6% compared with 2025. The reason for the decline in viewership is likely a growing question in the minds of many within the entertainment industry. Why is this happening? Well, some industry experts have suggested that viewership for the Oscars has declined as audience tastes have shifted toward streaming and social media, or just higher quality entertainment, not just in a live format, such as an award show, which seems kind of self-adulating and industry biased, to even more things that feel substantial and intellectually honest, which again, we talk a lot here about being authentic, and I don't think the industry understands that concept at all. ABC reported that social impressions were up 42.4% this year, which means that the people who are watching this were still talking about it, and more so on social media than anywhere else. But the Academy's social platforms jumped up to 21.6 million. Audiences may not have watched the ceremony, but it was widely discussed online, probably for what it's lacking these days because of the virtue signaling rules that were put in place by the Academy in the first place. And once again, Trevor highlights the fact that there's a significant drop in the awards show history, from 17.9 million to 57 million people, which was an all-time high because people turned up to see Titanic sweep the awards, which it absolutely, well, did. Look, you put out a blockbuster that at the time in those dollars, making over 600 million, would have been well over $1 billion, maybe $1.5 billion. I haven't done the math, but if you look at the inflation calculator, I'm sure it's significant. I mean, this is a film where you had actual stakes. You had a very toxic female plot point, the cheating relationship that was going on in the background, which a lot of people tried to ignore. But there was also, well, decent acting to a tragedy that we all knew the ending of. We just had two characters to focus on that, well, made it a little bit more interesting. Regardless, comparatively, this year's Best Picture winner, the politically charged One Battle After Another, or I would say one woke thing after another, or a love letter to the anti-FA folks, only made around 72 million domestic, and the film's biggest competition, Sinners, made nearly 280 million in the U.S. box office. And look, these are numbers from the U.S., and the global box office is not that much more impressive. In fact, I would say that when you look at the global numbers, they're down as well. There are very few films that are doing as hyped or as promoted. In fact, the collapse of the film industry and the number of starts in both television and film are substantially down and evident. And people that work in the industry are worried, and the people who get work in the industry are still, seemingly, according to the conversations inside the Oscars, too politically motivated and disconnected from the reality of the actual audience, the populace who could, but don't, go to movie theaters. Anyway, my thoughts on this is it's to be expected. I anticipate that we'll be seeing award shows decline for, well, the near future, at least shows that have a virtue signaling outline in order to just qualify. And again, if that's your only enforcement mechanism, it's hollow sucor for the studios, which actually are supposed to be profitable. And the investors have taken notice, including over there at Disney, which, despite the fact that they really need some winners, continue to produce losers. And Warner Brothers seems to be backing off the positive side of Hollywood and headed back into the black hole of wokeism. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the matter. What are yours? Do you think that these numbers show a different trend? Do you think that we've watched news networks collapse at least 50%, at least the stuff like PMS Now and similar left-leaning news, whereas the Fox side of the equation continues to grow? Do you think any of these things are related? Do you think politics being involved in everything in Hollywood is creating a problem? I mean, I really want your opinion, so let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, wash your hands because it's good hygiene and it's cold and flu season. Don't get sick. And until next time, see ya. Just not watching any Hollywood garbage.